Hey guys, how you doing? Today we're going to work on the 2014 Mustang. Now the last time you saw this car on the channel, I had a little bit of fuel delivery issues with it. Every single time I would go wide open throttle and then let off the gas, for whatever reason, the car started stalling out. Now, just to bring you up to date on what's going on with the car. It's a built motor, 10-to-1 compression. It has currently a 2650 supercharger on it from VMP, unported, meaning their first version of the supercharger. It has a Kenny Bell 168 throttle body. It has a 148 millimeter cold air intake. It has ID 1700X injectors running on E85. It has a return style fuel system, and it's making north of 1,000 horsepower or so with the 2650. With the previous supercharger, which we'll talk about in a second, the Whipple 4.5, it made 1100 through a turbo 400 transmission and just shy of 900 torque. So I ended up figuring out why the car would stall, I hope, and today we're going to do the vetting on it, why the car would stall when I would slam on the brake. I always thought, well, what's happening? Was it the fuel pump? Is it not grabbing fuel from the saddle, the other side of the fuel system? What was happening? Well, luckily, I uploaded a video not too long ago showing the FC3 controller, which controls the triggering of the fuel pumps for this vehicle. I'll go over the fuel system shortly, showing you that. But an eagle-eyed subscriber, Wit SVT, at Wit SVT, said, hey, when you wiggled some of those wires, I saw a whole bunch of arcing going on the FC3 controller, so take a look at that. So I ended up looking over the fuel system, and I'll show you what I found. Okay, so let's start looking over the motor here. So this has a return style fuel system. Tell a lot of people that are not really familiar with what a return style fuel system is. Well, these cars come with a returnless style fuel system, meaning the pumps deadhead, the pumps pump fuel from the tank, okay, and then it doesn't really return after it goes through the rails. It would just deadhead. You have a fuel rail pressure sensor here that would tell you how much fuel pressure is currently at the fuel rail, and it would pulse the injectors based on fuel rail pressure. It modulates the pulse with, the way I understand it, depending on fuel pressure. Now, there's good and bad when it comes to that. I prefer a deadhead system up to about 800 horsepower, no big deal. But once you're making big boy horsepower, you have to boost reference your fuel system, meaning fuel pressure should go up 1-to-1 with boost. And that's where we get this guy. This has a fuel rail pressure regulator because it's a return style fuel system. And what we do is we set it to about 45 PSI with a boost reference line installed at idle, non-idle 50 or 55, depending on what your tuner wants to do. And the fuel rails complete a return style guidance or return style path. So what happens is it comes up the pump, okay, through the fuel rails, and then it returns back to the tank once it's made its way around the rails. Now, there's varying opinion whether that's good or not. Now, a lot of people like that because you have equal pressure over the injectors. When it comes to fluid dynamics and heat and stuff, I have different opinions on that. But today is not to talk about what fuel system is good for you. We're going to try to diagnose why my fuel system started acting up. So before we do that, we're going to have to show you just the wiring real quick to show you how we trigger the fuel pumps, and then we'll talk about what could have caused the issues. Okay, the fuel pumps are controlled by a thing we call an FC3 controller. So what that is a small little device that is responsible for triggering the fuel pumps, and it is back here. So this FC3 controller is responsible for triggering your fuel pumps, and as you can see, they're labeled. It says pump 1, pump 2, pump 3. So the first two pumps are continuous. The third pump is triggered by a Hobbs switch. What's a Hobbs switch? Well, let's go to the front of the car again and show you what a Hobbs switch is. This is a Hobbs switch. What this is a boost reference, let's just say solenoid, that completes a circuit once it sees about 5 pounds of boost. Whatever this is configured to, let's say if it's 10 pounds, 3 pounds, whatever it's configured to, the moment this sees 5 pounds of boost, it completes the circuit, right here, and then it triggers the third pump. Now, when you look at how the fuel system is wired, this probably should go down. I'll loosen that and bring that closer. So this is a 100 amp fuse that's going directly to the battery, okay? 100 amp fuse directly to the battery, and that snakes its way under the car. You know, basically a lot of people run it under the car, right along the bottom here. I gotta move some stuff around. Come on, baby. It's gonna get hot in here, so I'll do my best to explain it. And then, you know, a lot of people that make a insanely clean install, which in my opinion, it shouldn't be hard to get to, but that's up to you. So what they do is they run the cable under the car, and then eventually it makes its way here. This is the power wire. So this has run its way under the car from that battery all the way to right here where it is labeled battery power. This should say battery power. Once the zoom comes into play, it doesn't want to zoom. There you go, battery power. Then you see right here, it says remote 2, remote 1. So this is the way it triggers the fuel pumps. But let's just keep it simple. Pump 1 and pump 2 are running continuous. Pump 3 comes on when the hub switch that I just showed you sees 5 psi. Well, the other thing it has is a ground. So the ground was potentially causing my issue. Previously, the ground was here. Right in there. See that bolt? That's where the ground was before. And what I started noticing is when I would wiggle the wires or wiggle the ground wire, a little arcing would happen all over the place. So I looked at the power wire, everything was okay there, but then the ground wire would, you know, by wiggling it, it would kill the fuel system totally, losing pressure, and I wasn't able to recover. So then I thought, okay, maybe that's why it doesn't act up on the dyno. Because on the dyno, the car's not moving. It's a stationary street, for lack of a better word. So the car does not experience any G-forces forward or backwards. And when I would slam on the brake after a pull, what would happen? This seat would come flying forward. Every single time I slam on the brake, I guess the little locking mechanism that is supposed to go there is non-existent. It's not there anymore. These cars have a little locking mechanism. Well, it's not there anymore. So when I would slam on the brake, this would jolt forward, putting a little stress on that bracket where the ground was, potentially causing the fuel pumps to quit. So I thought, well, let me relocate the ground and see if that is causing my issues. So that's what we did, and that's where we are today. I'm one of those guys that likes everything to be super simple and super reachable. So what I did is I made the ground very easy to get at, right there. So I grabbed the ground wire, took it out from the seat bracket, put it right here. So today what we're going to do is we're going to go out there, go about 80 miles an hour and slam on the brakes, then go wide open throttle again, slam on the brakes a couple of times and see if the issue goes away. If it does, then we'll call her fixed and we should be good to go. But I don't think we're going to do any 60 to 130 today. Today, what we want to do is just make sure that the fuel system doesn't quit once I slam on the brake. And if it doesn't, we're going to go ahead and install the Whipple back on the car, and we'll talk about that shortly. Okay, so here we have the 4.5 liter Whipple supercharger. What it currently has for a pulley, I believe, is a 3.5 pulley that it currently has on it, right there. 3.5 pulley. So the 3.5 pulley generates about, according to the log, between 28 and 30 psi depending on the day. If you have a denser air day, let's say you have a nice cool day and it's moving a lot of air, well, the 3.5 pulley on a 4.5 liter Whipple is generating about 30 psi. But that sounds high, doesn't it? Well, the difference is this one has been modified. This one has a Wilson manifold inlet that is pretty darn big. Now, the problem that is happening is boost doesn't necessarily mean power. Boost is just a measure of restriction. So what that means is potentially what is happening is that the amount of air that the engine cannot take in is just getting bunched up back here, and internally on the rotors and the bypass, it's just kind of just all pressurizing the case and the bigger inlet, because now it has more area to accumulate boost in. No matter how open the throttle body is and how big the cold air is, the engine itself cannot process that incoming airflow. So Bondobird, shout out to Bondobird, he said, hey Alex, I need you to do me a favor, and I would love for you to try it. I'd like to send you 3 pulleys, okay? One of them is a 3.75. The second one is a 4-inch. Let me see. He sent me a 3.75, a 4-inch, and a super low boost 4.25-inch pulley. And what I'd like you to do is try them all. And I said, I'm willing to do it. Sure, no problem. So the first one I'm going to try is going to end up being the 3.75 pulley. The reason I want to try the 3.75 pulley first is because I believe that pulley is able to be used with the current belt. Because if you look at the difference in pulleys here, it's not that different, right? This is a hair bigger, just a C hair, you know what I mean? And the belt, I think, will not need to be drastically changed because the outer diameter of the new pulley is not that much bigger. Now, when we get to the 4-inch, I'm pretty sure we're gonna need another belt because it is a lot bigger, in my opinion, unless we'll try it. We'll see if the tensioner can take up some of the slack, but I think I'm gonna need one. But for sure, 100%, we're definitely gonna need a different belt for this honker of a pulley. Now, this pulley, in my opinion, should only be used when you want to be at about 800 or so rear wheel horsepower. Boost is probably going to be 20, but this is the reason they sent me this combination of pulleys. They said, well, the current supercharger, the TVS from VMP, generates 18 to 20 psi and it makes 997 rear wheel horsepower. If this supercharger with the biggest belt, about 20 psi, can generate about 20 psi and make the same power the VMP TVS does, then, you know, we would just like to see that as a test. And I said, okay, but let's be honest. The TVS hits so much harder down low that I'm more likely to keep the TVS on it when it comes to which blower at 20 psi would I keep. Okay, so the next time you'll see me on the dyno with the Whipple is gonna be doing all that vetting. So what we're gonna do first, right off the rip, is we're gonna put the 3.75 pulley on, see what it makes, because we're lowering the boost. And if we can lower the boost from the 3.5 pulley and it makes similar horsepower, or at least we're up 100 horse over the TVS, then I know we're on the right track. Then put the 4-inch on, then put the 4.25 on, monitor IAT, monitor all that stuff, and after it's all said and done, we'll see what kind of power we can make with each pulley, as the TVS pretty much made 997 with ice, actually no ice, 120 or so IATs. I have that on video so I can record the difference. So if we can keep IATs moderate with the with the Whipple, with a bigger pulley, and keep the power, because it's not bunching up the power back here where we mentioned, where we think, because this is a theory that Bondobird has, we think, or he thinks, that the power is just kind of like getting bunched up back here and not really getting in the engine. So, okay, we'll see if that is what's happening, and we'll do some testing on the dyno, see what it makes with the 3.75 4-inch, then the 4.25 pulley. That's what I'm gonna do. It's gonna be a little while. I gotta figure out the belts. I gotta figure everything out. But once it's on the dyno, I'm committed to doing it that day. So it'll take me a little bit, but hopefully we can get everything done and get you guys some data. If it makes 30 more horsepower and I can't really make big boy horsepower unless it has a 3.5 pulley on it, I'll keep the TVS on that. Now, while all of that is happening, while the Whipple is away, while the Whipple is installed and I'm doing some testing, I'm gonna take that supercharger and send it out to Greg Kong. I'm gonna see if porting the 2650 VMP blower can make a bigger difference, at least 20, 30 horse, because if we can be at 1020, 1030 horsepower with the way it currently sits without adding a bigger ring on the overdrive or adding more boost to the car, I think we're going to be pretty good. But again, this is all in efforts to just test for content basically, and to get some data on an older 4.5 liter Whipple versus a TVS. Okay, but for now, let's go see if the fuel system's fixed.
The more I feel I should put a manual in it, because the amount of times I drive it, it's not going to be a drag car. It's too pretty to be a drag car, but I don't know, it's just like, I think I would enjoy it more if it was like a low 9-second stick car or a high 8-second stick car. I don't think it'll go 8 stick based on the weight and what I have to do to make it go 8s. I'd probably break a bunch of axles, transmissions, and go through many clutches before this thing goes 8s. But, you know, it's just not worth it to me. But a stick would be a lot more enjoyable than what I currently got going on. Don't get me wrong, it's nice. It's just, it's automatic. Like, you don't have, like, actual input in what's happening. Stab it, see if it goes sideways. Yep. But let me let off. Okay, good. Hopefully that fixed the issue, because that's what was happening before. I'd get on it, slam on the brakes, and it would die 50 miles an hour. I slowly feather into it. There we go. But it's still spinning the tire quite heavily, so could be the road also. At least I got the tires warmed up a little bit. It is hot. It feels hot. Not the car, the day. Shut off. That was the whole thing. This thing does not hook for shit. We're going 53. Let me leave it in third and whack it in third, see what happens. The loud converter's probably getting hot as hell, so I don't want to do that to it. I don't want to get the trans super duper hot. But third, if I'm going to do a roll race, from 60 seems to be the best. But looks like we fixed the fuel pump issue. It was a bad ground. Unreal. So hopefully that should wrap it up. So the next time you see this car, we're going to be on the dyno messing around with the Whipple. Put the 375 pulley, 4-inch pulley, 4.25 pulley, and see how all that goes. Right now, this thing is a little rowdy for the street, and I'm not willing to risk it for the biscuit. So fuel system seems to be fixed. It was a bad ground the whole time, so we're gonna leave it at that, and then we'll get back on this car once we're on the dyno with the Whipple and the